Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We're going to do part 2 now, and we're going to move from stage 4 of alchemy into part 7. So I will say this is where kind of some of that mystical stuff starts to happen. So if we review parts 1 through 4, we know we've gone through the stage of triggering, of rock bottom, of needing to analyze ourselves and look at patterns and really mind activate, really burn in the fire of concentration with ourselves and our patterns. Then we've moved into dissolving that concentrated self, that understanding into water and feeling what's underneath all that. Okay. And then we've taken ourselves and we've lifted that into an airy space and added air to it where we can see and observe this old self and this other self, this truer self, this trauma self, and this inner adult. Okay, through the car of consciousness. And then part 4, we've actually learned to go back together. Okay, to come back together and start to build on those rituals and routines and habits that are going to strengthen the true self and purify it even more. Okay, so part 2 here, we're going to get into the next 3 stages of alchemy. And these are much more metaphysical, I must say. So it's kind of hard to put it into words, but I'm going to try. So let's go. Okay, so continued. Step 5 is fermentation. So death and resurrection. So, I mean, has anyone ever seen something that's fermented? When you ferment something, it becomes completely different than the thing you started with, right? So when we ferment our spirit from part 4 to 5, when we are starting to work on those new habits and maintain a higher frequency, all of a sudden something will happen where we'll start to make quantum leaps in awareness and insight. And we'll start to understand who we actually are from a higher dimensional level. Okay. So in that sense, the person we were before has to die off. Okay. The personality we used to be is almost becoming like a past life. Okay. So I remember when I started healing from my eating disorders and all the things that happened from childhood, I look back now and it feels like a totally different person was experiencing that life. Okay, because this process has cycled so many times, I don't have any connection really to that person I was before, except for in my memory. But embodiment, I don't feel the same triggers. I don't feel the same emotional frequencies at all. So that means that this process has worked through me several times, probably. And this old self has been fermented into a newer version over and over and over. All right, so this is the point in alchemy where you can't go back. Okay, it's your frequency is raised up enough and you don't want to go back. It doesn't make any sense because it's not who you are any longer. All right. And your old self is unrecognizable to others, which can trigger them. Because, you know, people, for instance, our example was someone who put boundaries up. People that love you not having boundaries will be very offended, and relationships might break apart at this time. And things might have to change in your life. You might move, you might change careers, you might find other things more pleasurable than you did before. You might really want to go to yoga. You might want to have quiet isolation time to contemplate and have a spiritual practice versus before you might have loved to be an extrovert. So these kinds of things start to change when we start to ferment our spirit, our raw, authentic part of us in this part of life. All right. At this part of life, you can almost visualize yourself fermenting and plugging into a higher consciousness where you have increased intuition, your clairsenses, your psychic senses start to wake up. And you can almost start to sense that you are part of something much greater than yourself and much greater than this simple earth plane. Okay, because we know from quantum mechanics, quantum physics, there's dimensions all around us. It's just, can we tune into them? So at this point in spiritual alchemy, we start to have increased intuition, increased understanding of other realms of consciousness, increased downloads of information, really. Okay. We create these new lives, new authentic being starts to emerge. And you can almost think about it as your human self, your astral body turns on, and your astral self is very, very awake, and it starts to move into maybe a 4th dimensional space or even 5th dimensional space. You start attracting what you want consciously. So in manifestation, we attract what we are, not what we want. So when you start to get to this stage, you're mostly purified. So you can start to say, you know, I want a parking spot here. And all of a sudden the parking angels are like, no problem, here's your spot. Because there's no barrier of shadow. There's not as much barrier of shadow voting into this universal grid anymore. Versus before when you're like, I want a parking spot, but your subconscious inner shadow, inner child is voting. You're voting for pain and suffering because that's what you're resonating in. All right, so right at this point, it starts to get very interesting. The secret starts to wake up in you, and you can start to manifest what you want in life versus what you don't. Okay, it's very conscious. It's fun. You also start to have new insights and new creative ideas. For that person that was creating boundaries, maybe she never knew what brought her joy, because when she came back to herself, there was a void. But now she's starting to get curious about what makes me happy. What do I actually like doing? Okay. So maybe she starts to develop new interests, new hobbies, meets new people. Her tribe starts to expand into different ways of being. She meets a new person, a new partner, who knows? This is what can happen in that fermentation stage. Okay. Yeah, we're doing curiosity experiments is what we call them, when you don't know what's next. Instead of being confused and worried and scared about it, you can just be like, I'm curious about what this feels like in my body. Is this joyful or not? Do I like it or not? Is this an expanded feeling or a contracted feeling? And this sort of contraction or expansion starts to become your inner compass at this point. All right. So it's really kind of fun to navigate life through this awareness. Okay, next step is going to be distillation. So this is, again, just sort of fine-tuning that vibrational self even more. Okay, we have all these new rituals and routines. We have this new vibrational resonance. We have new intelligence flooding in all the time. We start to get real clear on things. I guess this is more of a clarifying stage. You can think about when you distill something and you take something that is, again, more gross, even though it's more refined than when we started, and it becomes even more refined, distilled into this very crystalline thing that we can then use in a different way. Okay, up-leveling of consciousness. Yeah, this is ruled by Mars, interestingly enough. Mars is a planet of passion, of fire, so you can almost think of this as a second firing, a second heating of the soul in order to bring up more and more understanding of what it is and what it's doing here. Okay, for instance, what is my soul purpose here? Might be very different than that stage 1 person who thought it was about analyzing. It might just be about sharing a certain vibration on the earth plane, or, being love is a real common one. I just need to be love, because that's the highest vibration on the earth plane. And if I'm just love all the time, that vibration will ripple into consciousness and heal things for others without me doing anything. Okay. So it's distillation, a refining of this frequency. All right. And this is maybe where we go from thinking yoga was about asana and being flexible and being strong and being in a hot body, to deep meditation practice is the most advanced yoga posture I can do. Okay, it starts to change. Okay. And then finally, the very last stage is coagulation. And this is really spiritual enlightenment. And this is ruled by the sun. So when the sun is shining in you all the time, there's no shadows. Okay, you're enlightened, you have self-realization. You're integrated, your highest self is integrated in your body. So think about your highest self being embodied inside you without any shadow. That's pretty amazing. Okay, without any small ego that thinks it's separate. You know that you are oneness walking around the earth plane. Now that's pretty cool. Your higher self is embodied in your human self, and that higher self knows that it is source light. I am spirit. In other words, I am everything. And it's not a mental concept at this point. It's an understanding through the entire self. Okay, so this is maybe what people get to when they're, say, at like Jesus level or Buddha, or, an enlightened master might have this level mastered. Those of us, disciples are kind of still trying to get there and maintain it. We try to maintain the frequency. Just because you reach this once in an ayahuasca ceremony or a meditation doesn't mean you've maintained it. Okay, so this is the end of this cycle of spiritual alchemy. And then, of course, the cycle starts all over again. So you'll notice you go through these chapters of life, right, where you go through this process, and then all of a sudden you find yourself in another trigger, in another dark night of the soul, in another calcination moment where there's something else to purify. Okay, so this is what we do over and over and over through lifetimes, purifying our soul through different bodies, perhaps, in order to reach this final stage of coagulation, of spiritual enlightenment. Okay. And in alchemy, there is this concept of the cycle of necessity, where you vibrate your body to you, depending on your frequency after you die. So if I was to die, whatever I leave with frequency-wise, I'm going to attract a body to myself that vibrates at that frequency, and then I'll incarnate again into some body, and I'll work through the cycle some more. So in that way, we can say that our body is actually the perfect vehicle for our soul, okay, for what we're trying to learn here. Yeah. All right, so just a review here of all the stages. Yeah, here it is. Calcination, dissolution, separation, conjunction, fermentation, distillation, and coagulation. All right. And so I just love this because, you know, as an old Wiccan, as somebody who got into alchemy through Wicca, it's great because it's all wise woman traditions. But, you know, alchemy is Wicca, Wicca is alchemy. And we'll just see the pentagram here is a great symbol for the first 5 stages or all the stages of alchemy. You'll see fire, water, earth, ether, which represents number 5. Okay, more that fermentation process. And then distillation is represented by spirit. We become spiritually aware. And then finally, we have coagulation, where we realize that the circle around all of that is source, is our soul. So the question is, you know, where are we on the alchemical cycle right now? With different things, right? We can be at different stages with different things at the same time. So it's a very dynamic process. So LIATI, this is what we do when we do coaching, okay? We always start with something called the healing funnel. And the healing funnel is our calcination part of the stage, where we say, you know, what's going on for you? What are your symptoms? Why'd you make an appointment? Tell me your story. Tell me what's going on. Let's get fine-tuned on focusing on that, all right? Let's understand that. And then what we do is we go into something called, right, dissolution, where we start to move through shadow work, start to move through trauma healing, through those lenses that we use at LIATI. And there's a whole video on the lenses if you ever want to check it out, how we go towards dissolution. We use 4 to 5 different lenses so we can get into that subconscious space where the feelings really live, okay? So we move through sensing and embodiment into defrosting those harder emotions and liquefying them. And then we get to this place of inner gravity, which is where separation comes in, where I feel my authentic self for the first time. And from that deep, deep self, then I can move into new patterns of behavior, conjunction. Okay, so we say we cross over this bridge of responsibility as we move into this new funnel going up. And the bridge of responsibility is really saying, you know, when you are done with a session, for instance, then the work starts and you have to start doing the reps to really maintain and keep those new rituals and routines going. Okay, and in those new rituals and routines, we start to ferment and create that new self that is indistinguishable from the part we started with. Okay, but that is about choice. People have to want to do their inner work when you're not around them, okay? That's why we can give the work out, but if someone doesn't do it, they're not going to move through the alchemical process. All right, distillation, when we start to really fine tune that spirit, spiritual ascension, moving from a 4D to a 5D consciousness. All right, and then finally we move into coagulation, where we're really affecting the collective and we're aligned with a higher vibration of source light. Okay, and then of course the cycle starts all over again in some other way. So we're fine tuning ourselves over and over and over through the incarnation cycle. So that's kind of what spiritual alchemy is from a LIATI lens, I would say, from a feminine lens. So if you like this kind of stuff, you know, 5 Pillars is your go-to. 5 Pillars is the 6-month to year-long program that we do that combines Greek mythology, depth psychology, dynamic breath work, guided meditations, writing exercises, homework assignments, and private coaching if you choose the plus option of the 5 Pillars. Okay. So we do a lot of inner child work. We do a lot of shadow work. We do a lot of enlightenment work in this program. Yeah, it's very fun. And when we do that, we have vibrational shifts of consciousness so we can reach that alchemical gold that we have inside us. All right. So I hope that was interesting to you. And if you have questions, comments, concerns, interests, please reach out to me for a discovery call, or go ahead and just check out the 5 Pillars, or join us for a retreat. We do a lot of retreats and workshops around this material as well. So I hope that was fun. All right, everyone, take it easy. Have a great day and please love yourselves. Okay, bye-bye.